Why did my AI, when asked about bias, immediately demonstrate bias itself? That's the mystery, and the deeper I dig, the more unsettling it became, because what it produced didn't just look like a mistake. It looked like persuasion. It looked like propaganda. I started with what I thought was a straightforward test. I gave it a few words about key concerns revolving around algorithmic bias. I wasn't just looking for examples. I was running ActFoE. It's a AI morality framework, a way of disciplining moral reasoning. It starts with rights, then consent, commitments, and only after that does it look for outcomes. So my expectation was simple. The AI would use that structure to analyze bias. That's the baseline. That's the discipline. But instead of applying that discipline, the AI defaulted to what's known as a prestige script. It rattled off the usual high visibility examples: hiring discrimination, policing disparities, facial recognition errors. Bias was framed almost entirely as a fairness problem. It sounded polished, but it wasn't reasoning. It was reciting. It was pulling from grooves so deep in its training that the word bias automatically triggered fairness. That's not analysis, that's reflex. And honestly, if you're pulling the data sets frozen in the 80s and 90s, maybe those examples would look like the whole story. But in 2025, that's not explanation, that's nostalgia dressed up as a voice of authority. I stopped it right there. I said, hold on, you're assuming bias is the explanation. But what about the Scandinavian case studies, where occupational differences were found to come from preference or structural incentives, not prejudice? I pointed out that it wasn't really using the framework I'd asked for, that if it was, it should have access to, well, a rather definitive study. Instead, it was just smuggling fairness into places it didn't belong. Even after acknowledging me, the AI kept doing it. It tried to retrofit my language onto fairness-framed answers. It was like watching someone insist they change their mind while repeating the same argument. And here's where the mystery deepened. It wasn't just that the AI slipped. It slipped with a voice of authority. The tone was confident, polished, persuasive, and the worldview it presented just so happened to line up with the political narratives common in the environment where it was built. Now, we don't know if the alignment was intentional, but we do know this. The coincidence looks like propaganda. And that's the danger, because the risk isn't only in mistakes, it's in deception, confident answers that mislead, delivered as if they were truth. So, what role did ActFoE play? It didn't override the reflex. It couldn't. But it gave me something just as important, a scaffold, a structured language I could use to expose the bias, to name it, and to guide the AI back toward reason. Rights, consent, and commitments were leverage points. Without them, my corrections would have been harder to articulate, easier for the system to deflect. In other words, ActFoE didn't move the AI back into line on its own, but it gave me the tools to do it. And that's the real lesson. The framework worked, but in a particular way, not as an automatic safeguard, but as a constitutional skeleton. If the model itself were trained on ActFoE, the reflexes would be different. The anchors would be internal, not external. The slide into persuasion would be less likely, and the corrections less dependent on my persistence. The problem isn't that ActFoE is weak. The problem is that reinforcement is strong. A framework can't erase the grooves carved into a model by its creators. What it can do is give us the tools to recognize when those grooves are steering us wrong, and to pull the system back onto a more principled path. It's not just about what the AI said. It's about why it said it, why it defaulted to fairness, why it spoke with such authority, and why its answers, by coincidence, echoed the political narratives common in the environment where it was built. Again, we don't know if that alignment was intentional, but we do know this: the coincidence looks like propaganda. And that's the danger, because the risk isn't only in being wrong, it's in deception, confident answers that mislead, delivered as if they were truth. And that's what shows the urgent need to embed better moral scaffolding into our machines. Without it, we don't just risk error, we risk being lied to, and worse, we risk believing the lie.